This is the Inwerken Capstone project from spring of 2013. What our group did for our project was connect two different services that our sponsor company uses. The first of these services is AutoStore, and it's a program that runs on a Windows server. What AutoStore does is allows various types of capture devices to connect to the server. Some of these devices could be multifunction printers, smart scanners, smartphones, and so on. AutoStore captures the content from those devices and then uses a processing component to process some of the data that's in that document. So one way of doing that would be using optical character recognition, or OCR. And then once the processing is done, it uses a routing component to send the process data and everything out to whatever the routing component allows for. So one example would be SharePoint, another example would be email, and now AutoStore will have the ability to export to Jive. So Jive is the other service that we've been using, and it's essentially like a Facebook for business. It allows for collaboration on documents among individuals of a business. So let's open up AutoStore here. This is the AutoStore Workflow Process Manager, and this is what the person who's managing the AutoStore workflow would see. On the left-hand side, you see several capture components. You have processing components and routing components. Our component that we made is called Send to Jive, and that is a routing component. So for the first part of the demonstration, I'm going to show the configuration form and show how the person managing the workflow would configure our component. So you have three forms here: scan to group, scan to project, and scan to space. There are three because there are three types of groups in Jive, or three different types of, like, they're kind of like folders. You have groups, projects, and spaces, and any three of those, for any three of those, you can store a document in that folder. So let's go in and configure scan to space. So this form, this is what the user who's standing at the multifunction printer would see. So this is where you configure that form. At the bottom you have all of the fields: subject, description, file name, tags, and space. The only thing that's going to change between scan to space, scan to group, and scan to project is this last field here. It would say group or project if it was in scan to group or scan to project. So going into the configuration of our component, in the General tab you have all of the settings for the Jive, the specific Jive community. So you can enter the URL for the community, you can enter your credentials, and you can also store or set a default save directory or save place. So in this case it's set to advanced sub, but you can change it by clicking this button here. Okay, and so once you click that button, you get a form that pops up, and it has one tab for each of the different types of places. So in the first tab, the Spaces tab, you have a list of all of the folders that are classified as spaces. And this is in a hierarchical structure because you can have subspaces of other spaces. So at the top you have the root Jive space. This is just the entire community, so if you choose that, then the document's not really going to get put in any specific space. It's just going to be out there on the Jive community. To the right of the name of the space is the ID of the space, and that's used to uniquely identify it, identify the space when we're storing the document. The projects and groups tabs look pretty similar. These ones are not in a hierarchical structure because you cannot have subgroups and you cannot have sub-projects of other projects. So it doesn't really matter what we choose here because we're going to change it when we open up the MFP form later. So going into the document tab, you can set all of the different properties for the document itself that's going to be posted on Jive. So you can choose a file name, subject, description, and tags. In this case, we're using what are called runtime replacement tags, or RRTs. So this one here, ACC : %sign file name, that means that it's going to pull that field from the MFP form and use it for the file name. So same with subject, description, and tags. At the bottom you have some of the different collaboration options within Jive. So you can set who may edit the document, who must approve changes to the document, as well as a comment policy on the document. The thing about these three options is that we did not get around to implementing them. This was a targeted requirement since the start of the project, but we just ran out of time to implement it. Okay, so when I hit OK, it's going to save some of the settings in the General tab to an XML file. It'll encrypt the username and password for security purposes, and then later on part of the program will, or part of the project will read that XML file, which I will show you right now. So back in the General tab, one thing that we didn't really expect we'd have to do when we started this project was write some VB script. None of us had really done it, and we just would have never expected it. So we did have to do that to make the MFP form more dynamic. In this way we can actually pull all of the spaces from the Jive community when the form is created and populate a drop-down list. So let's look at that VB script. It's not extremely complicated. But one thing I did want to point out is how we're using the Jive wrapper to get the data from the Jive community. So the Jive wrapper DLL, it's a compiled DLL. It essentially encapsulates all of the different communication between the machine and the Jive community. So when that object is instantiated, it pulls the credentials and the URL to the Jive community from the XML file that I just mentioned and uses that to connect to the Jive community. So all this VB script does is populate a drop-down list of the spaces from the Jive community. Okay, so let's see the component in action. So we must start the AutoStore server first. And one thing I'd like to mention quick before I do that is that the capture component we're using is called AutoCapture. The reason that we used AutoCapture is because it makes testing pretty easy rather than having to use one of these devices like a multifunction printer. We can just right-click a file on the computer, and then in the context menu that shows up, there's a auto capture button where you can choose any of the forms that I just showed, so scan to group, scan to project, and scan to space. So let's look at that. Alright, so to test this, I'll just do our final presentation. And here's the auto capture menu. You have all three of the forms that we saw in the configuration settings. So for this demonstration, I'll just do scan to space. And this is similar to what the form would look like for the person standing at the multifunction printer. Just give it a description. The file name, if left blank, it'll use the original file name of the file. So if I left it blank, it would just use beamer2.pdf, but I will give it a little bit more descriptive of a name. Tags, those are used to search the document within the Jive community, so it just associates a few different strings with the document. And for the space, let's just go with advanced sub. And then when I hit OK, it's going to send it off to Jive. Alright, so let's open up the Jive community and see how it did. So let's go to the Content tab. That's where all of the content on the Jive community is. It's not quite there. Sometimes it does take a little while to upload. There we go. So we have final presentation in advanced sub. That's the space that I chose. If we open that up, okay, so you can see the PDF file is here. Jive detects that it's a PDF file because we stored that in the, we sent that along in the JSON using just the extension of the file. The description's here, the tags are here. So yeah, everything looks like it's good to go. So that's pretty much it for our project. I hope you liked it.